LinkedIn. So real quick, just to kind of give everybody a little bit of kind of tie into the name. So we're calling our session or our episodes Dramalogue. It actually is a play on a word called Dramalogue, which is the emotional and rapid retelling of events in an overly detailed and dramatic fashion. So typically, if you read through that, that's going to be what we're doing. We're going to talk fast and we're going to go into way too much detail. So hopefully that's what you're here for. The play on words there is that if anybody that knows me, I'm a big whiskey fan. So it's really, we're pronouncing it Dramalogue. So we're going to drink a little whiskey while we're doing this. So I sent Linc a whiskey in the mail. So he's going to crack open his whiskey. If you're so inclined to join us for an adult beverage, please do. And we'll have a little adult beverage while we have this conversation. So anyway, let's get right to it. So while he's trying to open that, I'll put him on the spot. But
have you opened yours yet, DJ?
I'm actually drinking out of a half empty bottle. So I'm way ahead of you. So yeah. So while you're doing that, I'm super, super excited to have Linc as our guest this evening. I've got quite a long history with Linc. He's done some really amazing stuff. And his latest project is KnightMoves, and we're going to hear a lot about that this evening. So, I'm really couldn't be more excited to have him here this evening. I think what he's got to share is really, really interesting. We're super excited about it. We're partnering with him, and I'm really excited to let you guys hear what he's saying. So, I'm just going to make it really easy. I'm not going to try to do any more of an introduction than that. I'm going to let Linc kind of tell his own story. So, Linc, it is your show. Tell us a little bit about who you are and how you got where you're at, and then we'll just keep going from there.
Yeah, well, DJ, always a pleasure. Appreciate the long-term friendship and relationships. And in this industry, you just know you're going to keep meeting each other again. And that's one of the great things about having a long 30-year plus history in the technology industry is you're just continuously meeting people, people reaching out all the time to talk about, hey, what are you doing? I haven't talked to them in 15 years. So looking forward to talking to people. It's been even longer. So, just kind of starting out, I graduated high school in '86. DJ, what year was that? Did you graduate?
88.
So, okay. So you're a baby still in my book, just kidding. So, that was back in the good old Commodore 64 days, Atari days, right? Back in the 80s. And I knew back then that after, getting basic programming out of my Atari, that, I was going to be in the tech industry. Of course, like still today, if you talk to most male high schoolers, why they want to get into computer type stuff, it's, I want to do games, right? Which was my thing also, but it rarely works out that way, but that's okay. But I got into the whole IT industry at 18 years old, actually, because I'd watch my brother and sister go to college and watch them get, big debts racked up because we grew up in a small Iowa town of 6,000 people, and mom and dad didn't have money for college, so you either borrowed a bunch of money and went, and or I decided, I saw those commercials on TV with the GI Bill, and I was like, wow, that looks pretty cool. You just go and have that cool job, and then you get to go to college for free. So it's not quite like the commercials, but it did actually work, and I did actually get my computer science degree that way. It just took 16 years to get the degree. So it really wasn't that useful for me, but the useful thing was I got to go to Fortran school right away, and back in the good old days, and assembler and working on the mainframes, and got my start in the IT and tech industry back in the old Unisys mainframes, or Sperry and Burrow mainframes, back for those people who remember that far. And then just moving between industries over the last 34 years, from Department of Defense to consulting industry, to Fortune 500, Fortune 50, entrepreneur and startup, commercial product development. And, the last 7 years we're at the same company DJ was at Pillar Technology. I'd lived in Cincinnati, Ohio, most of my adult life, and then moved to Columbus to be the CEO at Pillar Technology about, probably 8 years ago. So that's my background.
Wow. Yeah, I had myself on mute. I was joking that the names you were throwing out there, the Sperry's and the Unisys, nobody on this call knows them but you and I.
Probably, yeah.
although they are what laid the groundwork for today. So, um, so yeah, so you kind of gave us a background or a history of your background, but what you're working on today is a really exciting thing called KnightMoves. So tell us a little bit about that and like how did that begin?
Yeah, and working at Pillar together, we we were a major alternative to offshoring, right? So offshoring, and in fact, I remember when I worked for a CIO that got rid of, and this was the time that I used to be a software developer, and I actually transitioned out of doing it because the CIO at a Fortune 500 company I was working at said, these jobs aren't going to exist in the United States in the future, right? This is all going to go offshore. They're just not going to exist here, and I'm not going to have these resources here. So I moved into program management and then management and executive leadership in that pathway, and really missed computer science from the actual writing software. But ended up at, he couldn't have been further from the truth as far as computer science in, software developer jobs going away in the United States. And a big advent of that was we actually learned how to write software over time, where, it became more agile, working collaboratively as a team. When software developers were working, you put them in a dark room or in the basement and you slid a pizza under the door once in a while, and they just worked real isolated. It was harder to get the value out of human beings. But once we began really working as product teams and, in agile or extreme, back in the beginning days of the good software development, if you will, that changed the whole course, where all these, your value as a developer was as also as a creative, and you just weren't somebody people were sliding requirements and you were spitting code out, right? You were an active member of a collaborative team. And at Pillar, we had a big emphasis on, competing with companies shipping this work offshore, and say, hey, let's do it onshore, and not just for a philanthropic reason, but we'll actually do it better. We will have something in production never longer than 3 months, right? Speed to value. How do we, be value driven and iteratively release and work with the organization closely? It wasn't even about being co-located or on site. It was just, culturally and, same time zone, and, people working together. And interestingly, when I was in Columbus, I think, Mary Kaufman pretty well too, but
Yep.
she introduced me to, when I was in Columbus, she introduced me to a leader in rural Ohio who had been trying, I think, for 8 years to become a regional rural technology hub, and had abysmally failed at doing that. So I went and spent a few hours with this individual. I don't remember his name, but it was 7 years ago, I think, or 8, and just learned a tremendous amount. And he basically, he started giving me all the reasons it failed. And that really intrigued me to turn me on to going, okay, what else are people doing out here in this space, and is it working? And I found, and still statistically, if you look out, you'll probably see that 95% of these rural tech kind of initiatives fail, and it's really interesting. But I spent all this time, deep diving into, well, why is this failing for you? And, being a seasoned expert in this industry, it just all made sense. And, I got it down to like, there's 7 key things you have to do on top of having a really strong internet backbone, right? Like fiber, which really hasn't happened in rural America until the last 7 years, where you really can get, true fiber to a rural community. When I say community too, I mean, even if it's just the Main Street complex, right? Where you could have a co-working center and training, because most rural communities that have a hospital or a larger, even a high school or education, they'll have fiber. Now, where the exception of that comes in is like, mountainous states that just, like the state of Washington. So anyway, I developed these 7 core areas that if you can't do all 7 of these, don't even start. And kind of as a hobby. And then I actually, for Pillar, moved to Des Moines, Iowa, to open up one of our forges, an innovation delivery center. And doing that, our I don't want to use the word eccentric, but our very dream-oriented CEO, Bob Myers, he, whenever there'd be some kind of meeting with Bob, right? Because I reported to him, it'd be, hey, I'd always want to go into how is it operationally going, right? How is this new business, this investment going? And he'd always stop me and he'd say, well, stop, Lincoln, tell me your dream. How do we tie your dream to what you're doing? And I said, well, I want to do it. We're opening here in Columbus and, and Detroit, Ann Arbor and Des Moines. I want to do these in rural communities. And he's like, well, do it. And Bob was kind of that simple of an individual, right? And he's like, here's your guidelines. And I had all of the the resources, the capability. You look at all those 7 pieces that were missing. I had all those. And interestingly, one of the 7 pieces that was always missing is I never saw anyone in the technology industry actually doing this. It'd be some kind of economic development leader. It'd be an educational leader, or even a boot camp leader, which I'd still, boot camps are great, but I'd still put them in that education space. And, just not anyone with really industry savvy or knowledgeable experience was really engaged in that. So that's the birthing of KnightMoves. Is it actually started under Pillar technology as a commercial application.
Wow. So, and that was, if I remember, granted, I was involved in some of that. It was about a 6 or 7 year journey.
Yeah, it's been solidly 4 years right now, like definitively, of actually spending money and actually moving cards and not just ideas.
Wow. So now that you've kind of got that together, so what would you tell somebody your mission for KnightMoves is?
Yeah, and I always refer to the 2 sides of the coin of the KnightMoves mission. One is we to fill the massive technology talent shortage with the industry's best technology talent from populations from urban, underserved, and rural communities. That's the first side of the coin. The second is we want to be the Silicon Valley innovator to innovate and solve the problems that are plaguing society, from poverty to human trafficking to drug addiction, you name it. If it's a public benefiting cause, we want to solve that. And we do both of those at the same time, which I'll talk about as we go along here.
Wow. Yeah. Really. I mean, I'm a little, it's a little unfair. I've heard this story 6 or 7 times, or probably 6 or 7 dozen times. So every time I hear it, I get a little more out of it. It's just amazing. So I'm going to change gears just a little bit, because I actually prompted you with this question the other day when we were talking, but there is a very interesting background that you have. It's not boring like mine, just a blurry, hopefully you can't tell what's behind me, my mess that I've created. So you've got this really interesting space scene. So why do you have that?
Well, first I'll give you the technical reasons. The first is, you're on different tools all day long, right? Whether it's Zoom or Google or Blue Jeans or, Teams. And no matter which tool I go on, it's a real physical tapestry, right? Just, go to Amazon, they're $25. You can pick a gajillion different ones. And what's nice about that is you just always have it there. I do a lot of showing pictures with my phone, and DJ and I are both avid smokers. So we can like show pictures, although my cable wasn't long enough, but I can actually put that over there and, show pictures of something, right? Whereas when you put that blur background on it, it blurs that stuff out. The other reason is that when you have the blur on, I have such silver hair, I'll call it silver, not white, that it like makes me almost completely bald, and I'm not ready to be bald yet. When that day comes, I'm okay with it, but not there yet. So those are the technical reasons I do it. But there's an inspirational reason for me is, after being 33 years in the commercial industry and coming out and saying, you know what, I'm going to take the rest of my career and focus it, dedicate it toward, making the world a better place. Is it's a reminder to me that I'm up here, if you want to say proverbially sitting in heaven and looking down on earth and saying, okay, what exists in heaven and what doesn't exist in here? Like poverty doesn't exist, right? Racism doesn't exist, human trafficking, right? All these things, they don't exist. So if they don't exist here, they shouldn't exist there. And that's really the purpose of KnightMoves, is how do we eliminate those things that are on earth, but not in heaven, right? Let's make this place a place where all human beings can prosper and thrive.
Very good. Yeah. We Sarah and I were talking to you the other day, and we were trying to come up with questions and make sure that we had a lot of good content for today. And that question came up, and I really hadn't anticipated such a thoughtful answer. So I figured it was I had $20, I needed a background, I called Amazon, but no. So I thought it was very interesting, and people should hear that. So, but okay, so back to KnightMoves. So tell us how KnightMoves works. So how is it different than other organizations? What sets it apart? Like why would somebody, either from a business organization, from an organization, why would they want to be involved? And then from a person participating, a student, or why would they want to be part of it?
Yeah, and I just want to say too, I'm grateful. I want to thank all the people who've helped with this, because there's so many minds with just 10, 20, 30, 40 years of business and technology experience who sewed into this. I just thank you all for all of this, because these aren't all my big, great ideas. But and if you have ideas, send them my way, please. And we do have a contact page on knightmoves.org, so feel free to go there. But the first is that we don't want people to partner with KnightMoves because we're philanthropic, right? We don't want that to be the reason. We want it to be the reason is we are producing the best tech talent. That if you needed a problem solved that was affecting society, we'd be the first ones you'd think of, right? To go, you know what, we need to get KnightMoves to innovatively engage that and create solutions. And in that, we said, well, whatever we do in this, we're not going to duplicate what other organizations are doing well, right? What's the missing? And I'm going to give a few of those examples, but because one thing I've discovered is every company I've ever worked with, or as a consultant, with or for myself, everyone wants a better world, right? Everybody wants to help people, but companies really, aren't designed to really do that, right? To say, well, how do you help Black Americans get ahead? How do you include rural populations? How do you solve these problems of society, right? Our companies are so geared toward our mission and our goals and what we're doing. It's really difficult for companies to do that. Now, the bigger the company, right, you get a 5, 10, 20 billion, $40 billion company, they start slicing, chunks off of money to focus on it, but especially from large to mid-sized to smaller companies. So we said, how do we fill this gap for them? Like getting them the best technology talent there is. And then also, let's not do things that replicate what's working. So for example, something that works really well is the community college system and the dual enrollment credit programs, where you can be a high school student and take college classes, right? And they teach the basic skills of computer science, like Java or C# or data structures, right? JavaScript, all those things. Now we don't want to be a teaching company, right? So one is we're not going to have any teachers or instructors. That's not us. But one of the first aspects we saw that was really needing in the industry is there's such a low percentage of people who really understand what a career in technology is. So we said, that's the first thing we've got to do. We've got to get out. And we focus on 2 demographics within urban, underserved, and rural. And that's mid-career workers, typically mid-career workers that are in lower pay, but that are in jobs that are at risk of losing them due to advances in automation or artificial intelligence. And that's typically, 10 to 15% of our focus. That could change to be more in the future. And then there's the high school, right? The youth, right? Which is really, it's like if you solve some big problem in a company, you're always like, well, I've got to solve the problem, but I've also got to retrofit to everything that exists. So, how do you stop the bleeding, right? So let's stop the bleeding with getting the youth on the right track. And it's way cheaper. It's the easier one, right? Comparatively to the mid-career worker. And we can talk about, if we have time later, why that one's so much more complicated than getting people right off the gate, right? Well, but also, keeping people out of gangs, keeping them out of trouble, keeping them out of jail, right? How do we help support that? So one of the things that we're really, really good at is we can go into a school and in 30 minutes, get students to understand, wow, I am really interested in a career in technology. I didn't even know what technology was. I had no idea I had an interest in it. And then to get them the next semester to sign up for a community college class that's computer science, for them to kick the tires and see if it's for them. So some current data, so like going to high schools, we have not gotten less than, so if we talk to all the students that, we're going after, like in a rural school, like all the sophomores and juniors, we have not seen less than 33% of the students respond with, I'm going to sign up for a class the next semester in computer science, right? That's incredible. I mean, you look at typical computer science, it's 1 to 3%, right? And of those, we're also really good at getting women, the female students, into the program, which is really hard. Rural, you'll generally see 7 to 10%. Urban, if it's world-class, 25%. That's the numbers I've seen. Maybe there's some that higher. We're getting 38% of our participants being female into the program, which I think is phenomenal. That's not good enough, but we're really good at that. So first is we help individuals understand they have an interest in it. We get them to sign up for a class. If they like it, that wasn't the whiskey, because I would have probably taken.
That was the moonshine.
Yeah. If they're interested and they like the class, then we support them in their development, right, as they keep going to make sure they complete all of our prerequisites. And then they come to our program after completing that. So if we're in the high school track, imagine it's going to take maybe a year out of high school to actually complete their prerequisites. So, and if we want, we can talk later about those specific ones. But again, those are we don't want to teach what community colleges are really good at teaching, or you could go to a boot camp first, right? If that's more your thing, learn the technologies.
Yeah.
But what our program is you actually create real world technology hands-on for up to a year, right? So, but you do it as a commercial product development team. So you join, you become a member of 7 to 12 people, and you create software. Excuse me. And when you're doing this, again, you create it like you're a Pillar Technology, you're an August20, right? Name a leading premier technology services firm. That's how we actually create the software and the product, right? And you're not learning Java and C#, you're learning the software craftsmanship skills from, continuous integration, continuous deployment, all those aspects, right? Solid. And then you're learning value management. You're learning how to work as an agile team and collaboratively. So, and you don't graduate our program until you demonstrate you can actually do the job. That's why we have employers lined up to hire our people. Is, would you rather hire someone who's finished their education or who's proven they've done the job, right? And that's what we're doing. Is no one can graduate our program until they've demonstrated they can walk into an August20, a Pillar Technology, a Google, a Microsoft, and actually do the job. And we did a cost savings analysis at Pillar, and we showed that people coming through this program would save us over $28,000 compared to, excuse me, just 4-year college computer science graduates, because they were so much ready more to hit the ground running. And then the final thing we do is bring social capital. And what that means, we bring the employers to our graduates, right? We don't just train them and do like interviewing skills. We actually bring the employer and set them up for the jobs. And if they happen to be in rural, these are jobs that they can stay in the rural community and they don't have to relocate, right? Which is a big part of the program. So that's really some of the key examples of differentiators we do that I don't see anybody else doing, in this path. And community colleges absolutely love us. High schools love us, because we can walk in and walk out with their students engaged in STEM.
Right. Wow. Yeah. I'm going to take just a 30-second break here. I forgot to say this at the beginning. As most of you will notice, that we've muted everybody's microphone. So if you have questions, just type them into the chat, and then we'll collect those. We're going to try to end about 20 minutes before 5 and give everybody a chance to. We'll go through those questions. You can either ask them in person or we'll just read them from the chat. So I didn't want people to think that we didn't want to take questions, but we found that keeping the flow with the speaker is really good. So, so back to kind of where you were leaving off there. So this whole program came out of a profit situation. So it was the effort was a for-profit, and now you've moved it from a for-profit to a non-profit. So how did that experience go? What did you learn from that, or what did you wish you hadn't have learned from that, or however you want to answer the question?
Well, that was a really supportive way of doing this too, right? Of doing it first in the commercial world and transitioning over. And it actually brought some really, I'll just note some people in the industry that get noticed, right? Which is always nice when you have really noticed people who notice your program. So for example, if anyone who's read Microsoft Chief Technology Officer Kevin Scott's book, Reprogramming the American Dream, From Rural America to Silicon Valley, he has 7 pages in his book on this socioeconomic forerunner in both education. How do you prepare that top technology talent that you need? Because obviously our system today isn't working right. You look out, 150, 200,000 jobs always available. So we need a better way. And other nations are just gearing up for this as nations, which we're not doing here. So that's what we're trying to do with KnightMoves, is geared up. Also, the Congress member who represents Silicon Valley became aware of this, and his name's Congressman Rokana, and he got very engaged in the program. And he has a tweet out there of saying, we're the most the best innovators on bringing rural tech jobs to rural communities. So, a couple of those things really help propel. So transforming into a nonprofit from a for-profit, and DJ, you'd have the same thing here, right? Is we're consultants, we're curious, right? we could drop into any, Fortune 500 company or midsize or whatever company and just start going, how do we make this better, right? What are the innovations we could do? What are the growth projects? What are the efficiencies that we could multiply if we did certain systemic kind of projects, right? So for me, I have to keep focused on KnightMoves, because going into an industry that I really had never been in the belly of the whale on, right, of this nonprofit industry. But I'll say there's three big areas that I want to see get innovated, that you can see why not more is happening in the nonprofit space than you're actually seeing. And that the first one is, and this will be kind of funny because, my personality, once again, curious, consultative, but also very direct, which can be good and can be bad, right? And so I'll be meeting with foundations because, your primary supporters of a nonprofit are state grants, federal grants, foundations, and philanthropists. Individual donors, not so much in this. Maybe they could be, but these are bigger projects, right? But obviously, if you have enough small donors, you can do anything. So meeting with these foundations, put the solution out there, and everybody goes. I mean, I've had some of the biggest organizations in the country say this is the most comprehensive program we've ever seen at actually creating jobs, actually effectively helping underserved populations, right? There just frankly aren't many good programs out there, which is the other feedback that we get from companies is we're dying to hire your people, because when we hire people from underserved programs, we have so much investment into them because they're so much further behind than of a computer science degree, right? That it's just not, we struggle because we want to support, but how can we? Because it's so expensive. But, in sharing with these foundations, the first question, because, you got to think about, in my mind, I always imagine foundations, these organizations that are just looking for new ways to solve problems of society, right? And I found that there's truth in that. They really want to solve them. But most foundations run on process, right? Just like most big companies. And by that, what I mean is the first question they say is, show me your 4 years of examples of success. And I go, 4 years of example. And I'll ask them a question. I'll go, okay, if you need 4 years of examples of success, show me any program that's doing what I'm describing, anyone that's successfully doing and advancing Black Americans, Hispanic Americans, low income, rural communities. Give me an example. I go, yeah, we don't have an example of one that's effectively working. And I go, okay, so what you're telling me is if you're only going to support organizations that have 4 years of success, nothing is ever going to innovate the space because nothing can get in unless there's some private philanthropist that'll help prove it out until the foundations. But then there's a challenge too, because you find out most wealthy philanthropists give their money through foundations because they really, there's going to be 2,000 nonprofits knocking at your door for money if people are realizing you're handing out. So it's just much easier to give it to the foundations and trust them to do it. So, when that happens, the philanthropist money goes to the foundations. The foundations don't meaningfully support anything innovative. So we're not seeing these social problems get innovated because the system is just, you could call it, it's not designed to be systemic racism or systemic inequity, but it's systemic inequity. And we're not transforming the country because so I talk to other nonprofits and I say, well, how do you do it? They go, well, we just comply to their process. I go, does that mean you'll not be effective to comply to their process? Well, we won't be near as effective, but we'll get the money. And I'm like, well, I'm not going to play that game. So that's the first thing I ran into in the nonprofit world is this whole 4 years of success, or it's real, the foundations really don't want to be part of it. Right. And they don't want the next cylinder, right? They can't risk it because if they have a bad project go under, it's not like a venture capitalist, right? He goes, I'm going to invest in 5 things. One's going to become an Uber, right? Or an Amazon or whoever. 4 will fail, but I'm still going to do great, right? If they have that one that fails, they're afraid all of these other, givers are going to stop giving money because, they're not managing it well. The second part is when you get into the state grants and the federal grants, if you're trying to do something transformative, right, like this, where you're going in, you're talking to the high schools, you're getting 7th, 8th graders, 9th graders, 10th graders. These are very transformative in these urban communities and these rural communities, right? And it's not a 1 or 2 year project, right? If you just get funding approved for 2 years, then you're not going to do anything transformative. So the system is designed to be very short approvals of funding which, you know, again, for this, that's very difficult to do. It's like, well, how do you do something transformative? Well, you don't. Well, no wonder we're not getting transformative projects happening and, you know, helping our underserved communities because there's not funding for them at the grant level. And then I'd say the third kind of big constraint that's interesting in the nonprofit world is one of the boxes that's always on every application is, how are you going to be a fully sustainable operation as a nonprofit? And I go, well, this is really interesting. The IRS requirements for being a nonprofit are that you can't make money. Now you can charge some program fees for things, but if you don't have a base of donations of 33 to 50%, that is your foundation of how you fund yourself. They say, the IRS says you're not a nonprofit. So you have this constraint of, they want nonprofits to be sustainable, but to be a nonprofit, you can't be sustainable by definition. Now, again, you can, I'll say 50%, maybe 70%, not even 70%, right? 65%, you could be sustainable through program fees. But so, you know, working in those three constraints and coming into this, it's really easy to see why you know, nonprofits it's very difficult to come in and innovate unless you had some kind of philanthropist oversight support behind it.
Very good. There was a lot of information to consume there.
So hopefully it was something you could digest. Sorry about that if it was just a dump, a data lake.
So I'm just as a time check, it's 4:35. We're planning on stopping around 4:40 to let people ask questions. So I'm going to combine a couple questions together. We'll let you answer that one, and then we'll open up for questions. And then if we have a lot of questions, we won't get to the rest of our questions. If people are kind of light on questions, then we'll just come back to our lists. So the next two I have is, one, how do companies get involved? And, you know, what are the, you know, how would they do that? How would they be able to become part of the KnightMoves program? And if during that you want to talk a little bit about the kind of the partnership that we, August 20, have put together with KnightMoves and how we're working with you on that program, that would be good too.
Yeah, well, you know, it's really easy for companies to engage, and the easiest thing they can do is just sign up to be graduates, right? And frankly, for to win these grants that are like state and federal grants, probably the most valuable thing there is letters of support from employers. So if you're an employer, you can reach out to me, you know, directly, or, you know, go to the KnightMoves website, click contact, and it'll come right in on whoever you want us to get back to. We're very accessible, but, you know, just hiring our graduates. And again, I will say, don't hire them because you're making the world a better place. Hire them because you're getting the best talent and you're, you know, making the world a better place, because you're always going to make the world a better place in two ways. Everybody coming through our program is either urban underserved, meaning low income minority, or they're from a rural community, right? That, you know, like 88% of rural Iowa is shrinking. The majority of rural Ohio is shrinking. How do we stop that, you know, I mean, if you're in a small town and your grocery store closes, your hospital closes, your schools consolidate, and you have a half-hour drive to school, which doesn't sound like long when you live in the urban world, but in the rural, just go to school. So, you know, all these things are happening, and we don't have to do this, right? And I think we need to be having a mature discussion on, you don't need degrees, right? You know, we have to get HR to pull that out. I mean, if it's something that requires a degree, like a doctor, please keep a degree. But, you know, software development jobs, right? Product designers, user experience, you know, project managers, you don't need a 4-year degree, right? That's, you know, gosh, best people in the industry I've ever worked with never went to college. And, you know, don't require relocation. We just proved with COVID, you can function with a portion of your team, you know, offsite, right? Working remote, with all of your team working remote, right? For the last year. So don't, you know, this is a big social equity piece, right? Don't let your company do something where you're just blindly requiring degrees, requiring people because it's more productive to work on site. Is, you know, 90% of people in studies are saying we don't want to come back and work on site full time. I've seen studies where they're saying they're turning down $30,000 offers so they can keep working remote offers, but I mean increases in pay. But hire graduates, contact us. And I tell you, one way to make this 100% sustainable that meets the IRS requirements and would make this is if every time an employer hired one of our graduates, if they donated $10,000, that pays their entire way through this entire education, right? And it would be a donation. That's not a requirement. You don't have to. We want you to hire our graduates because, you know, the more employers, the more graduates, right? It feeds each other. But if you can, and I'm telling you, you try it, you're going to save $28,000 to $35,000 hiring one of our graduates over a 4-year computer science degree. You experience it yourself. And, just click on that contact link. And, there's also this, and DJ, kind of back to that nonprofit thing, this really throws foundations off when we start talking about other ways that we innovatively do stuff. So our relationship with august20, right? So, everybody I think understands now software as a service or cloud computing, right? And, the premise is you don't have to buy all those servers, you can leverage and use what you need. Well, as a nonprofit and coming from the services industry, we said the same thing in KnightMoves is, we don't need to have an army of employees. We need to have a strong group of partner organizations like august20, because like the relationship that august20 and KnightMoves has is if we leverage one of their career technologists, we pay their cost, right? So we pay what he pays, but we don't pay, right? He just charges us cost. And what that means is that's the same as me going and hiring somebody, right? So instead of me having somebody that's $120,000 a year, $140,000 a year, or whatever it is, I'm leveraging the incredible resources in DJ's company and some other partners, but DJ's our first and leading one here. Thank you for showing the way on that, DJ. And now you have, again, we always want real career technologists leading these teams that are teaching them, right? So we always have fresh talent. And then it's also a great tool for the companies, because instead of having your people go to the bench, you can at least get your money back and work on projects, right? Where they do it, there's some help for you there. Also, it's a great path for our graduates to hire. So let's say there's a client that august20 is supporting, that, there's always this issue of, well, we're doing this year-long project. At the end, we're not going to have anybody that supports it, right? I've been in hundreds of those conversations. Well, bring on a couple KnightMoves grads, have them work the entire project with you. And then when the project's done, transition those fully trained, right? They're fully acclimated to the context of your products. They can support that new technology completely because they've been part of creating it, and the way that, our organizations pair and rotate, fully be able to support it. They transition your team, so now you can get, a diverse, inclusive talent pool that's the top technology talent, and you can capitalize it all. That's part of this capital asset that you're creating that was done via your services partner. And, you don't have to worry, IT doesn't have to worry about how do I support this. So a lot of synergies, right? And again, we always want to be looking as a nonprofit with KnightMoves. We always will be. How do we do this where everybody wins, right? Where I'm not just reaching out my hand and saying, can you give me money? Can you help me, right? It's like, hey, DJ, here's how this is going to be a positive for august20. And this is how it's going to be a positive for your clients, right? And you're doing all these other things. And then you go, well, this is just a no-brainer. Why wouldn't we do this, right? It's better, it's cheaper, it's faster, and we're socioeconomically advancing the country.
Very good. So that was perfect, right on time, 4:42. So let's open it up real quick. I mean, I've got probably 10 more questions, but I'd like to hear other people's opinions and questions that they have for Linc. So if you've got one, just Kyle, if you want to, we can just let people unmute now if they want to just ask their questions verbally. If you prefer not to vocalize it and would rather type it, go ahead and put it in the chat and we'll ask them. And I know most people in the call here, so don't make me call you out.
Good to see some familiar faces too.
Hi, Mr. Blancaire.
Hey, Ben.
Linc, I'm curious if you can talk a little bit more about the process of getting people interested when they're still in high school, and how that like flow kind of happens from them just being another high school student to eventually becoming part of the KnightMoves program.
Yeah, absolutely. So the first thing we focused on, well, and I have to say, I probably did 150 interactive student discussions before I figured out what's important to adults isn't important to high school students. So, obviously learning how to speak to your audience. And the first thing we start with in presenting to high school students has nothing to do with jobs or the cost of education. We really get into examples of these are the kind of problems that KnightMoves innovates with, from design thinking, there's practices and approaches, right? But how we use them to solve problems in the international disaster relief space, or you name the space. And then we show actual, like, the technology, what it looks like and the kind of problems we're solving. And then, basically all these students go, this is amazing because, there's something different about the young folks of today than my generation. My generation, when we graduate high school, stable job, good paying, right? Um, be able to buy a house with a white picket fence, right? We had a totally different trajectory. This newer generation says, I want to fix the problems of the world, right? I want to solve these problems, and they're seeking solutions, right? And they're looking all over the place because what they're seeing, this isn't meant to be a political statement, but it's meant to be, a lot of us older folks look and we see how many of the youth are into things that we go, socialism or Marxism or all these things, right? And we go, well, and probably a lot of people in our age group might be positive on those too. So we're not trying to knock them, just pointing out that they're seeing what we're doing in society is not working. And they're going, there's got to be another way to do it. So we really focus on, we're solving these problems in the world. And then, hey, would you like to be part of that? Oh, and hey, would you like to be part of that and have the best skills to get into the technology industry? And by the way, we'll also help you get into, bring the employer to you and, bring the full gambit. And then, getting into also, because they really have no concept of debt. So I literally will open up my, my wallet and I'll take out a stack of cash and I'll say, okay, what do you see here? This cash, right? Okay, $453, right? And then ask a question, okay, who in here could do something meaningful with $453? And everybody raised their hand. I will say I just baited them a few minutes ago because I do multiple questions. I give $5 if they get, for the person who gets the closest answer. So they might think I'm going to give it away, but I'm not. But so anyway, they're all excited. And I go, okay, so if your mom and dad didn't, weren't able to save up for you, and again, this is urban, underserved, and rural, so not common, or you're not able to get a scholarship, the oldest person in the room, how old you? Usually it's 17, 18 years old. I said, okay, so imagine 20 years. Is that a long time? Heck yeah, that's 2 years longer than I've been alive. Okay, so take the traditional pathway, go to college. If you didn't have the scholarships and you didn't have that, you're going to have a monthly payment, depending on how much you have to borrow, could be $350, $450, $500, $600 a month, every month for 20 years. Stop. 20 years every month. And they go, oh, I had no idea, right? These high schoolers, they've never had a payment in their life, right? So they don't understand this debt concept. So, in 30 minutes, taking them through, help solve the problems. There's another way to do it. And by the way, you could continue to support your in your community. People don't really want to leave their families, right? They just, especially in rural, they're forced to. They're looking for, when we do focus groups of individuals from 7th through 12th grade, especially 10th grade, about would you love to stay in your community longer term? Tremendous response, right? And the reason they don't, there's no opportunity for what I want to do for a living. So all of that leads to getting them to sign up for, like, there's a 2-pack class we're doing right now in Iowa where they get introduction to programming and they get C#. One is book and one, book knowledge, and the other is actual hands-on, and they mix them. And then they go through that semester, we support them through it. And if it's something they dig, then hey, keep going, right? But at least you tried it. And you could never go wrong taking one computer science class, right? It's a pretty easy sell. So hopefully, I went to a lot of detail there, but hopefully it was enough to answer your question.
No, yeah, it was. Thank you. It's really interesting, and I'm curious to definitely see, results, at some point of like how successful that portion of the program has been, because I think that's like obviously a huge win for getting people in when they're younger, right, and getting them motivated and excited about the industry. So, yeah, thanks for the extra information, and I'm just curious to see how it progresses.
Yeah, and just one note there too. So something interesting we're doing in Iowa, and by the way, this is true in Ohio. You have 22 community colleges in Ohio. There's 15 in Iowa, and 15, maybe 3 to 5 could teach our prerequisites, right? Because typically the urban community colleges, like a Columbus State, could teach them. But if you get out into Marietta, they can't, right? Because community colleges usually do 2 things. They prepare a talent workforce for the local employers, and the other is they help people get started for a 2-year degree to transfer to a 4-year degree. So there aren't typically a lot of local employers with computer science jobs in rural. So what we're doing in Iowa is a pilot where communities that are in areas where their community college doesn't provide our base computer science classes, our prerequisites, there's a online collaboration that's doing it. And the feedback from students is phenomenal. In fact, the first school we presented to, 47 students said, yeah, I want to sign up, and the community college about freaks out. You know how hard it is for community colleges to get high school students in their computer science program? Then, you know, and we just kept having that until they finally said, Uncle, you've overran us with 3 schools of all of our capacity to be able to do this for right now. We'll have to gear this up before we go more, because the goal is in states, right, that every Ohioan, every West Virginian, right, every Illinois person, Iowa, all these states, no matter if you're urban or rural, you get the same access to this education, right, which is not today. It's a major socioeconomic disadvantage if you grow up in a poor urban or rural area, in many capacities.
Very good. Hey, before we go into another question, Kyle, do you want to do this? There's a quick survey that TechLife asked us to complete at the end. So if you want to go ahead and fire that off, people can complete that. I think it's important that we get the information, and I know Ben and team appreciate getting the information, and hopefully it will direct the next. I'm trying, Ben. It will hopefully direct the next version of TechLife Live series and where that goes. So I promise
Yeah,
you.
I am having some technical difficulties. I'm trying to start the poll. I'm going to see if Maddie can do it for me. We'll see if I'm not able to do it.
It just popped up for me, Kyle. I've got it right in front of me.
Awesome. Thank you, Maddie.
So anyway, if while people are completing this, if people want to, if there's any other questions.
I just want to throw out there too, anybody who wants to help bring this to Ohio, I have 3 rural communities who really are trying to bring this there, and then working with Black Tech Columbus to get this into Columbus. And obviously would love to get it in Cincinnati and Cleveland. And you know, the vision for Ohio, and I think most of your people are Ohio, but and I could say this for any state, is how do we get every county in your state to be getting 10, 25 tech jobs a year, every year, that can stay local, and then you know, 100 to 200 in your urban areas of low income and minorities. That's the goal, right? Anybody who can help with that, please reach out.
I can help. Just send me notes, and we'll get that. We'll talk to some folks at the state
Sounds
that
good.
are in workforce development.
Very good. I know Linc has talked to Jobs Ohio a little bit, so I'm sure you have lots of connections.
Just a couple.
More than any human I know.
Well, you know, if we can't get money for programs like this with the massive $2 trillion we're spending on infrastructure and economic development, I mean, man, now is the time to invest that money. Is there anything better to invest it in than people that's going to raise to get jobs like this, right? I don't know of a better. I'm probably biased because I'm in it, but
Yeah, I think your biggest lift is going to be around getting employers to believe that it's not the state, it's not the students, it's getting employers to change how they hire.
is that right? Yeah. And so far I haven't had a problem with that, Ben, but that's a good discussion to engage.
That's literally every time I have one of these conversations, that's where the rubber meets the road.
Interesting. Thank you.
Okay, so we have about 8 minutes left. Does anybody have a question they would like to? I think we have about time for 2 more, and I'm going to give the last one to Linc. So Linc, you can be thinking about this. I'm going to give it, open it to you to say anything else you want us to know. So last chance for somebody to ask a question. If no questions, I'm going to open it up to Linc and let him run for the last 5 minutes.
Well, gosh.
Surely there's somebody's got a question.
You know, well, if there is a question, I'll stop, but I'll say another good one. If there's employers out there. So I was on the Technology Association of Iowa board for 3 years. And one of the big problems we had is so many people leaving the state for, you know, East and West Coast jobs, and interviewing them, they really didn't understand. So this is something I incorporate in all these student presentations. Share some company names with me that with us that those companies are, you know, just dead reliant on technology to exist. Never, ever, ever in one classroom setting have I ever had a student say something like, you know, a John Deere, a Kroeger, you know, or, you know, name any big company. I mean, every company is flipping dependent upon technology, right? they always say Google and Microsoft and, companies like that. So the first is, so what our Luminary program does is it's 30 minutes with somebody like, Ben or DJ or right, probably anybody on this call, right? Who they go in and they do three things. They share, hey, here's the problem we solve for society, right? So my favorite speaker on this we have is Glenn, Glenn from Corteva. They're a, used to be DuPont Pioneer, right? Seed company and chemicals and things like that for farming. Is he goes in and he goes, okay, what we do is we feed the world, right? Just some simple, how do we make the world better? The second is then showing them all the technology that they utilize, right? And it's like, wow, that's some incredible technology. And then here's the kinds of careers that it takes to support them. Now these students from 7th grade through high school are thinking about this, right? So every week we want to be putting new employers in front of these students with, these are employers that you could be working for in your state, solving real problems for humanity, really cool technology with great careers, and creating this pipeline, right? And then us, because we have more than just software developer. We have specializations in different areas to help with industries. So, we can be creating your future top pipeline, right, with you, and you can be helping getting students into the program and finishing, giving them that vision and staying in your state versus thinking I have to leave. So any more time I need to throw in there, DJ, or is that close?
I've got two questions. I guess I've got one question. It is, would it be possible to apply this approach to other fields, for example, biotech, nanotech, semiconductors, et cetera?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know why you couldn't apply this to any direction, right? It's what makes, I would say it'd probably be the funding model of how to do it, because what's beautiful about our approach is to be compliant for a nonprofit, right? You have to be doing nonprofit kind of things. So these either, let's say we go to a big nonprofit and we say, let us help innovate you and technologies for you, right? We can take our participants and put them on that, and that's a bona fide nonprofit problem. But if I put them on a commercial application, it'd be like, you have to pay them, right? Which we would prefer to pay them, but just realize for every 20 people we pay bringing through the program where they're paid like $15 an hour, we can bring 100 people through the program where they don't get charged for it. So it's really a matter of economics, right? In the state of Iowa, I have a grant right now where we're taking people through this program and they're being paid $15 an hour. Well, again, it's just economics. Do you want to take 20 people through it and pay them, or do you want to take 100 through it? Now, if you were always paying them, you can solve any problem you want. It doesn't have to be a nonprofit problem, right? Because you're not abusing those standards. But so for us, the kinds of tech and innovations we're doing, there's so much help needed in the nonprofit world. And when you look at nanotech and biotech, I don't know if there'd be enough projects there. It might just be you have to fund it in the model of you can do 20 at a time instead of 100 at a time, right? Which makes it's about $57,000 a person to put through it if you did it where you had to pay them, and it's about $10,000 to do it if you don't have to pay them. There were no constraints and money was unlimited. Yes, you could do all those things.
Right. Any other questions? All right. Anything else you would like to add, Linc? We've got about 3 minutes.
Nope, appreciate it. Love Columbus, loved living there for the 3 years I was there, and obviously over 20 years in Cincinnati. And I know you have more people than Ohio on here, but what an awesome state. And I'd just say what a fantastic job you're doing. You guys are kicking Heine in Columbus from a tech capital perspective. Always love seeing you in the news, and keep it going.
Very good. Well, I wanted to thank you. This is we actually had a little hiccup in the middle with our second session, so I think we came in really strong for our third session. So we got a thumbs up from Ben, so that's good. I think the information is really interesting, and I think it's something important. So I'm really glad that Linc got to join us today. I could always just sit and talk to Linc for an hour. It's about anything. That's not a problem, but giving him a little bit of an opportunity to kind of share what KnightMoves is and let people ask questions and hear about it. It's, I think, a good time or a good use of our time this afternoon. So if anybody has any questions that come up later, knightmoves.org. Your email is linc@knightmoves.org.
Linc, which is Linc, Kroeger, which is Kroeger, not like the grocery store. There's an E after the O. So Linc.Kroeger at knightmoves.org. And that's night like a chess piece, not like the Bob Seger song. So it might just, that's why I just say go to KnightMoves and click contact, because
Yeah.
that's a lot to remember when you're
Yeah.
typing stuff.
Remember knightmoves.org with night like a chess piece, and then you can go from there. So
Excellent.
this was amazing. I really, really appreciate it. I had a great
Yeah, thank you. Cheers.
Cheers to you as well.
Take care.
Go to bed. Thank you,
See
guys.
everybody soon. Thanks a lot. Hey, Link, we're going to stay on here just for a minute if you want to.